Among the four major American sports, the Detroit Lions rebuild has been one of the more impressive in recent history. It began such as any other by setting the foundational pieces. For the Lions, the first position filled was atop management. On January 14th, 2021, they would name Brad Holmes Executive VP and General Manager. 6 days later, the most influential piece of their current operation would take place as Dan Campbell was named head coach of the franchise he once called home. One of the main reasons as to why they felt Dan Campbell was the man for the role was because of this connection to the team, this natural desire to be a Detroit Lion. In his introductory press conference, he preached how he wanted to bring pride back to the city of Detroit. The first move under their tenure would be the most impactful in achieving that. 2 months after their initial introductions, they would go on to deal the most decorated quarterback in team history and once franchise cornerstone Matthew Stafford to the Rams. In return, the Lions received a 2021 third, 2022 first, 2023 first, and as a throw-in, former Rams 2016 number 1 overall pick, Jared Goff. After a rough first year in the league under Jeff Fisher, a fiery 31-year-old Sean McVay was given the keys to get the most out of Goff. For a while, that is exactly what he did. Jared Goff came out the next season throwing for over 3,800 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions en route to an 11-4 record as starter, capturing the NFC West with ease. The next year, even more improvement, eclipsing 4K yards and 30 touchdowns. From the perspective of the box score, Jared Goff was nothing short of elite. The Rams had captured the 2 seed behind a booming youth movement in Los Angeles led by Sean McVay, Todd Gurley, and of course Jared Goff. Towards the end of the year though, Todd Gurley would sit the final 2 games due to what was stated as knee soreness and inflammation from a knee injury from week 1 that had progressed throughout the year. Unbeknownst to most, these would be the final weeks we would see peak Todd Gurley. After 3 weeks of rest, he would come out in the divisional round taking 16 carries for 115 yards and a touchdown. Nothing seemed off in terms of his production, but a deeper look would tell you Gurley played just 57% of snaps, his lowest on the year up till that point. The next week, the clear drop-off began as he handled less than a 50% workload, taking just 4 carries. With the Rams' rushing attack becoming less of a threat by the week, the limitations of Goff became just as apparent. Having scraped by the Saints via an egregious no-call, they set themselves up for a matchup in Atlanta against the Patriots dynasty and Tom Brady. The star of the show, ironically, would go to someone on neither sideline, but instead Bears defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. Nearing the back half of the season, this Rams offense had looked unstoppable. Through 13 weeks, no team had held them to less than 23 points. Heading into Chicago, that would all change. Fangio and a stellar Bears defense held Goff to the worst game of his career at that point, forcing him into 4 interceptions and allowing just 6 points. Vic Fangio had put the blueprint on the market. Ready to scoop it up was none other than Bill Belichick, who not only used Fangio's blueprint, but actually had him design the Super Bowl game plan. It worked. He had once again designed a game plan that held the Rams to just 3 points, keeping the final showing from Gurley to a minimum and forcing Goff into yet another poor performance. Fangio was seemingly becoming McVay's kryptonite. For the first time in this era, the Rams offense looked exposed, and because of it, Sean McVay changed his entire philosophy, a philosophy Jared Goff could no longer fulfill. Over the next 2 seasons, his production would regress significantly, along with it would the Rams' record. After 2 disappointing playoff games, in part due to injury, we get to where we left off at the blockbuster trade. The Lions were not receiving a former number 1 overall pick that had a resurgence, but instead a shell of that who was sent to rot in a city of darkness without a glimpse of success. Through all of this darkness though, the mentalities of Dan Campbell and Jared Goff would be a perfect match. They both went about every aspect of their life in this moment with a huge chip on their shoulder. The 2 guys that no one wanted leading their team were now the 2 most integral pieces for the laughingstock of the NFL. In their first year, that's exactly what they were, a laughingstock, starting the year 0-10-1, well on their way to the number 1 overall pick. Not all was lost though. Over Goff's final 4 starts of the year, the Lions would go 3-1 as he threw 9 touchdowns and almost 1,000 yards. Jared Goff was becoming the city's sliver of hope. He was becoming Detroit. The guy that was kicked to the streets by the people who believed in him most had found a home, and along with it, his confidence. That year, the Lions had drafted Penei Sewell and stolen Amon-Ra in the 4th round. Yet somehow, the most important person in Goff's development wouldn't be placed in a prominent role until the upcoming offseason. In February of 2022, Ben Johnson would be promoted to offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions, a move that would change the course of this franchise. Ben Johnson is a very smart smart individual, not just in football, but in general, and he gave us an articulate view into the molding of Jared Goff prior to his own experience with him. Johnson states that what had happened in Los Angeles with McVay and how he operated had put Goff within the thought process that decision-making in football was binary, a game of solely ones and twos, rights and wrongs. For months, Ben Johnson would go on to instill in Goff that not only was the position more than that, but that Goff could do more than that. Over time, he began to see a different Goff, a more confident player beginning to come out of the cocoon McVay wanted him to operate within. In their first year together, Ben Johnson, Jared Goff, and the plethora of offensive talent at their disposal would break out into a top offense in the league. Having started the season 1-6, this wasn't enough, although they'd put the NFL on notice. Heading into the 2023 offseason, the rebuild up to this point had been a glaring success. But there was still one string left from the beginning of the rebuild that they had yet to make a decision on. Were they going to prepare long-term at the quarterback position, or had the emotional connection to what was supposed to be their bridge quarterback blinded their overall goal? Leading up to the 2023 draft, with a strong quarterback class up front and essentially 3 first-round picks, the Lions made their opinions clear that Jared Goff was still their franchise. Holding on to all 3 picks, mind you, they hit a home run with Gibbs, but the point remains. The Lions showed their commitment and faith in Jared Goff to get the job done. He rewarded this trust with the best year of his career. Better than any year in Los Angeles, Jared Goff had hit his personal peak. The Lions won the NFC North, they beat a streaking Rams team in the wild card, and held Baker Mayfield in check to advance to their first championship game in over 30 years. After what felt like an eternity to get there, the Lions would quickly go up 24-7 before half. What happened next was nothing short of a collapse. Crucial down after crucial down, the Lions would just come up short. Dan Campbell said after the game that this may have been our only shot, to which, was Goff the reason they lost? No, not even close, but whether or not he elevates them to the level that is needed was a question he truthfully had yet to answer. And to Dan Campbell's point, you don't know how many opportunities you're going to get. So when that moment comes, you want to know that without a doubt, the guy leading your team is the best player on the field. With the playoff collapse fresh in their mind, Lions management had to once again answer the question, is Jared Goff their future? Do they want to try to go up for a quarterback? Do they extend Goff, or do they let him play out his deal? Now, this past year was a stacked quarterback class, but I can't sit here and truthfully say I think they ever thought about attempting to trade up. Genuinely, I believe Dan Campbell and management were so infatuated with Jared Goff and the journey they'd taken together that 3 years after trading for a guy that was sent there to die, they extended him for 4 years at a price tag of $217 million. For the second time in his career, a franchise made an extensive financial commitment to Jared Goff. As the regular season got underway this year, this offense once again looked phenomenal. This time though, so did the defense. The stars were aligning for the Lions to get another shot at the Super Bowl. That was until Aiden Hutchinson went down on a meaningless snap against a Cowboys team that they were pummeling. From that point on, it was all downhill. The injuries began stacking up, and because of it, they were a bottom 5 defense the last third of the year. Heading into the playoffs as the 1 seed, it was Jared Goff's time to show he was the man. He could overcome the defense and get them to where they needed to go. He could be their game changer. At home against Washington in a game that was expected to be high scoring, Jared Goff turned the ball over 4 times. The guy they had just paid over $200 million was a complete net negative for this team. A game manager can only operate as long as the situation around them remains unchanged. In a vacuum, this works perfectly, but the modern NFL is not a vacuum. Elite quarterback play trumps all when the margin for error shrinks in the playoffs, and Goff has proven time and time again he doesn't push the needle. Adding insult to injury, the 2 game callers that have been so impactful for this team are getting poached. Ben Johnson is now with their division rival in Chicago, and Aaron Glenn has interviews lined up. The Lions had an absolutely free path to a dynasty. Instead, they are now stuck with a $200 million question mark at quarterback without the ability to really put themselves in a position for an elite quarterback prospect until 2026, in which they probably still won't be high enough. This brings me to my overall point of this Jared Goff arc. What is currently going on in Detroit is a timeline we have already seen play out in a trade we've been told was even for a while now. Looking back on the trade, there were clear winners on both sides. Unfortunately for the Lions, they haven't cashed out. Jared Goff is a game manager, and when you catch feelings for a game manager simply because you can maximize him, you end up with bad quarterback contracts, putting a team surrounded with great talent into a purgatory that they may never work out of. Sometimes despite the connection the city may have to a player or even the numbers they're putting up, the string has to be cut for the betterment of the team. The Detroit Lions did not cut that string.